And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Mark Piper, the Transition CEO at the Bioeconomy Science Institute, Māngatayo. Mark took up his role on the formation of the Bioeconomy Science Institute last July and has supported the board and staff through the merger process. Previously CEO of Plant and Food Research, Mark has worked with the CEOs of the other three CRIs involved in the merger to provide continuity and deliver on collective initiatives to support integration and the formation of a new operating model. Prior to joining Plant and Food Research in 2023, Mark spent 30 years at Fonterra Cooperative Group. Mark's address will be followed by a Q&A, so if we could just hold questions till the end, but there'll be plenty of time. So thank you, Mark.
Just adjust this for regular height, people. Ina mana, ina reo, I rau rangatira mai, na hapu e toru, tēnā koutou. Everyone, good morning. Great start to the morning here in beautiful Rotorua. And I think if you talk to anyone who lives here, they will tell you the weather is always like this. Sunny, crisp, and beautiful. Great to hear Minister Simmons speak, and you know, she's only been in the role for a little while, so to get her to come to our conference this early on, I think is fantastic. So well done getting her along, and you know, I think great to sort of understand that clarity that government is driving. It's one of those funny things where we want them to give us clarity. We don't always want the clarity they give us, but we do actually want the clarity, and I think in this case it will serve us well in the future. Look, knowing the room I'm in, as I go through these slides, I suspect there'll be a lot of nodding heads. Probably not going to tell you something that you haven't thought of or haven't heard of already, and I am looking around, just definitely not the smartest person in the room, but I am working on it. I am working on it. So hopefully, how long does it take, Angus? Look, hopefully I'll connect a few dots today, and for those of you that are pushing through journeys that we know are tough and challenging, but worth it in the end, hopefully I'll connect a few dots and re-inspire you if you need it. Look, I'll touch a little bit on the Bioeconomy Science Institute, BSI, but only a little bit, and then talk how important this conference is and the work that each of you do. So, Bioeconomy Science Institute, I'm not going to read out exactly the words there because you can all do that, but we're nearly a year old, so we're coming up to our first birthday, which makes us pretty young, but we're actually nearly 100 years old. So we stand on the shoulders of giants. We've been you know, doing this for a long time. If you go back to the DSIR and MAFTEC and all the original precursors that have come before, and you'll see next week actually we'll be launching kind of 100 years of science. So you'll see some cool things coming out, talking about the amazing things, kind of that what has science done for me lately? A hell of a lot. And I don't think people probably appreciate it, and I don't think we collectively, and I'm looking at all of you, do a good enough job of telling the stories and continuing to tell them. Things we did 20 years ago still matter. Things we did 50 years ago still matter. Things we're doing now will matter, and things we're doing tomorrow will matter. Tell the story with pride. It's a pretty cool story of the things that we've done, and you know, listening to Max talk at the start, God, there's some cool stories in there, and I've had the chance to meet with a lot of those companies, and there's some really cool stuff to be proud of. So, look, for us, and for me in particular, a really truly privileged role in New Zealand. One of the coolest things about my job has been getting to work across the whole BSI, which is kind of all of our sectors, you know, primary sector from soil to secondary products, environment, society, preservation of native species, eradication of pests, urban and rural landscapes. Massive, right? It's huge, and it's such a critical part of what we do for New Zealand. If you look at New Zealand's bioeconomy, you know, it's actually slightly, you know, higher, $60 billion of export revenue. That's a monstrous big number. Over 80% of goods exports come out of what we do in its broadest sort of sense. And it needs to grow, and it will grow. It'll grow through sustainable volume growth. That'll definitely happen, but more specifically it'll grow through improved productivity, better land use choices, and of course creation of higher value products. The government, alongside industry, have set an ambitious target to double export value by 2034. If we're going to be honest with ourselves, that's not going to come by simply doing more of the same. There definitely will be growth in that, but in many cases we're really shipping potential in bulk. So we can realise some of that potential. We'll grow through productivity and scale, we'll grow through doing things smarter, but actually a huge amount of value will come from seeing familiar things quite differently. We know how to create value from things we haven't always seen valuable, and particularly in this room, it's something that we're good at. If you look at the economic growth that's happened in our sectors, it's pretty amazing, and again, something we should be incredibly proud of. But we also know it won't all come from our sectors, it won't all come from the bioeconomy, it'll come from technology, digital space. Those things all do have a role to play in the future of New Zealand, but let's not kid ourselves, we'll be a large part of this growth. And we need to be. We make healthy, delicious foods, we make sustainable and innovative wood products, we make amazing quality wool, and importantly, and particularly in this room, we know how to create value from things that haven't always been valuable. Because if you look at the history of the bioeconomy, some of the most valuable products we've got today started life as something people were just trying to get rid of. They weren't trying to optimise it, they weren't trying to scale it, in many cases they weren't even trying to export it, they were just trying to make it go away. And that's because waste is a funny concept, right? If you look at it through a different lens, again, know the room I'm in, it's not a problem. It can just sometimes be a lack of imagination. And I know in this room there is no lack of imagination as to what we could be doing. So look, let me share a couple of stories with you of things that I suspect many of you probably know better than I do, but they'll help set the scene, and for those that are sort of pushing through your startups and your early journeys, hopefully give you a belief that things can come out. When I started in the dairy industry, which was a really long time ago, I'm just as old as I look, I started in a casein factory. I started in a packing plant and then into a casein manufacturer. For those that don't know what casein is, it's about 80% of the protein in milk. It has a lot of different uses. It's also the main protein that sort of helps cheese become cheese. And then there's this stuff that comes off the side called whey. Now, when I started, there was a company, it still exists actually, but there was a company called Civil Whey. I was at Hotapu in Cambridge, and Civil Whey every day would drive tanker loads of whey, liquid whey, off-site to feed to pigs, to spray irrigate, to do something with. We made a lot of liquid whey, so there was quite a lot of that. Those trucks left quite regularly, and if you drove, as I did, sort of from Cambridge town out to the Hotapu site every day, you'd see this greenish water being sprayed on fields. Not actually bad for the grass, and quite a bit of nutrients in there, but it was not necessarily something that people wanted. It also created no value and just created cost. So it was a waste problem. It was an environmental liability. Today, $8 to $10 billion global industry. Same product, same molecules, just a completely different story. So we've gone from how do we get rid of this to holy crap, this is really expensive. So quite a turnaround for something we used to give to pigs or spray onto fields. When I had the privilege of travelling with an NZTE group a couple of years ago, and one of the places we visited was Almeria in the south of Spain, an area that was historically quite poor, not necessarily the best growing conditions. You might have heard of it, it's kind of a sea of plastic greenhouses. It's tens of thousands of hectares of covered growing. It's also one of the largest tomato producing regions in the world. We visited one of the co-ops that was there, and you see this automated tomato packing line. Now, I don't eat tomatoes, I'm not a big fan, but they looked amazing as they were going out. But if you've been around food, you know that there's no chance that every tomato that's been harvested is going through that packing line. So these, quite often co-ops have got together, they're looking to pick up the product and then process it, but they're looking to make sure they reduce waste. And so in their case, they were saying, well, we've got this amazing product, it's got a blemish, it's not quite up to the high standard, what do we do with it? So in the case of where we saw it, they turned that into usable products. It was interesting talking to, they turned it into pastes, into soups, into pasta sauces, into a whole bunch of things which we sort of take for granted. But actually their model wasn't trying to drive value, interestingly. Theirs was, it needs to break even. This is something that was a waste product, and so they've created store brand products, they've created their own brand, and it's actually economical. So they've created purposefully a second tier affordable product And you could argue that, geez, that doesn't make sense, surely they could make a lot more money out of it. But actually that's part of what they want to do as part of the community they're in, is to be able to make sure they use all the food and provide delicious food to people. So their focus was on utilisation. Everyone will know what this is. Juice, right? Juices, whole fruits have been around forever, but they've also had issues forever, right? There's waste products, and I know you'll hear some things later today on different uses of some of those whole fruits. But also sometimes demand's less than supply, you've got surplus, a whole bunch of different things that can happen. So someone would take that problem fruit and then turn them into juice. And I can imagine the conversations when someone many years ago said, I'm going to start bottling fruit juice, and people went, people will just juice it themselves. Like, don't be stupid. It's now a couple of $100 billion global industry. It's done okay. So when you hear those people who go, no one will ever buy this, right? No one will buy bottled water. I can get it out of a tap. It's done okay. Fruit juice has kind of started off small, and then on the back of that, people have then got the even more valuable components, right? Pectins, flavour components, oils, fibres that are all being used. And it's interesting if you look back at the time, we thought they were building a kind of a juice industry, but actually what they were really building was one of the world's first biorefineries. And that's continued to grow. Look, for the next slide, I'll apologise in advance to any foreigners that think this is weird, but I will talk about Marmite and Vegemite. And for anyone who's come from overseas, particularly out of like Asia or even the US, and eat this, they go, why? Why do you feed this to children? But for those of us that grow up with it, it's delicious. So look, Marmite was invented in 1902 actually, in England, to utilise waste from brewing. It was a German scientist that showed that brewer's yeast could be concentrated into a nutritious salty paste. Became popular, high vitamin B content, used heavily during World Wars I and II, and included in soldiers' rations, right? So this was, again, waste product that suddenly became a staple, suddenly became something that people on the front lines that were needing nutrition took with them. Vegemite, which came a little bit later, 1923, was basically a new product to replace imported British Marmite because it was having supply issues. Similar concept though. Again, global yeast-based spreads today, sort of $600 million global industry from, again, a waste product. So if you look across what's actually happening here, my perspective on this is that the same four things always show up. An opportunity or problems identified. My strong belief is that needs to have material scale. So solving something small is great, and by all means please do it, but actually solving something that has material scale is going to get more backing and also grow into something more successful. Then technology unlocks the access to that, so suddenly we can separate, extract, ferment, refine. Synthetic biology is coming through, different membrane technologies. A lot of technology has driven what we're doing today and what we've done in the past. And then, in a lot of cases, science has reframed value. So protein becomes premium, fibre becomes functional, waste becomes bioactive. Some of the subcomponents that are in black currants have clinical backing behind them that go, hey, this is really good for you, and here's actually what it does. So all of these things work together. They don't work in isolation. And then, finally, the system thinking scales it up. We stop making one product. We start building biorefineries, big industries. We go from that'll never work to why didn't anyone think of this before? Surely we weren't the first person to think of it. You probably were. And you were probably the first person to take the risk on doing it. One of the things that we hear a lot about are these overnight successes, right? And I guess there's a few in the room that are hoping to be an overnight success. Well, I'll burst your bubble if it wasn't already burst. There's no such thing. And I love this example, and it's weird I love it because I don't drink coffee, but Nespresso is one of those overnight successes that suddenly came up, and they had George Clooney advertising it, and Nespresso shops in the main areas of different countries. Nestle patented that core system in 1976. Yep, I said 1976. So, an engineer was travelling overseas, noticed some Roman baristas aerating espresso differently, created something from an engineering perspective, and no one cared. They launched. There was, if you actually go back and look at them, there's some really cool early photos of the original kind of Nespresso machines. They were clunky. No one wanted them. People didn't understand, why would you do this? And Nestle got very close to killing the project. The breakthrough really only came when they stopped selling coffee technology and started selling identity, convenience, experience. They didn't really win because of the coffee. I'm sure they make great coffee. No one makes great coffee, but I'm sure they do. They won because it understood convenience, identity, system design, premium experience better than anyone else. Which I think for us is a useful reminder, right? Innovation often fails not because the science or the idea was wrong, but because the story isn't ready yet. And again, your view on why someone should buy your product isn't always their view on why they should buy your product. And sorry to again burst your bubble, but one of those views matters more than the other. Probably the one buying it, just in case anyone needed that mansplained. Look, I'll just bookend my talk with a little bit about some of the forward direction we're embarking on in the BSI. So we're looking to drive ourselves as we've come together into a more missions-led framework, driving under 6 impact areas. We are working across internally first and then with industry to sort of set key targets underneath those. But I would hope everyone in this room can see yourselves in multiple of these. So bio-based industries, I would hope that one really stands out to everyone in this room. But actually when you look through all of this biodiscovery, how do we make sure we protect what we've got as well as unlocking some of the things that we've got in our native flora and fauna that we don't know about yet? Bio-based exports, how do we double the value of exports going forward? How do we make sure we've got climate resilience, both in our landscapes and the environments that we live in and play in, as well as the economic side of it? How do we protect what we're doing? So you'll see us evolve this over the coming months. We've started with our own people because we've got brilliant people and they know a lot about what we're doing. We'll create some drafts and then we'll come out and talk to sectors, and then no doubt it'll get iterated over time. So look, let me just close with a couple of comments and then I'll happily take questions. So look, thanks for making the time to visit beautiful Rotorua, and it is a beautiful city. If you haven't spent much time here, have a look around if you can. Get to Te Puia, get to our building. There's a great cafe downstairs in our Rotorua campus, and it's a beautiful drive through the redwoods, and you can go for walks through there as well. Let me just leave you with a few final thoughts. One of the things history teaches us very clearly is that transformative industries really look transformative in the beginning. Whey protein spent decades as a disposable problem. Nespresso spent years looking commercially questionable. Things like fermentation have repeatedly cycled between hype and irrelevance before becoming strategically important again. Many of the technologies and products we now consider inevitable spent a long time looking very niche, possibly a little weird. I suspect that many of the ideas represented in the room today are probably exactly in that phase, because the challenge with bioeconomy innovation is that timing matters enormously. Science can be right, the processing can work, the product can genuinely solve a problem, and still the world might not be ready for it. But when markets, technology, regulation and consumer behaviour finally align, changes can happen incredibly quickly and rarely scale behind it. So if there's one thing I hope this symposium reinforces, it's that the work happening in this room is not peripheral to New Zealand's future economy, it is central to it. So thank you.
Underestimated the distance up the stairs. I think I'll just sit there from now on. Thank you. Although I'm getting a few steps in, can't be a bad thing, right? Just a couple of reflections, Mark. Great presentation, and I was thinking that I'm a regular heart person, right? The tomato example is wonderful, because I think one of the things we took from the symposium last year was the sense of community. That we're all doing different things and doing parts of different things, but by coming together, we really create something quite amazing. And so I'd just like to, thank you all for being here. It's fantastic to have the second year, and really that sets the scene for this sense of community, and particularly sort of reflecting on, the retrenchment of McCain's and Watties in our vegetable sector. And, there are some real challenges ahead, and good things take time, but they also take some people who are prepared to take risks and make some investment and work together and collaborate. And I think that's what this is all about. So, yeah, open the floor for questions. We have roving mics, so please wait for the mic to come to you so everybody can hear, and I will be the spotter. So if you'd like to ask Mark a question, your time is now.
The questions were so good.
Yeah. Michael.
Thank you for your presentation. I really appreciated your thoughts about timing being important and things sitting in a niche state. And it was a great example. Thank you. What are your thoughts about how we can shift things? I'm not sure how to explain how we shift things from the niche space into more general, create that identity, or even right from the beginning, how do we think about that from the early stages of developing a product?
Yeah, look, great question. I wish I could tell you I had the exact answer. I'd be a billionaire if I did. But look, I think the things that are important are really understanding what's the problem you're trying to solve, being really honest with yourself. Is it actually a problem to be solved, or is it a solution looking for a problem? Who has the problem? Would they pay to have it solved? Are they actually the people that will pay to have it solved? Because sometimes, maybe a good example is in the dairy industry, where you've got people like Nestle talking about what consumers want around sustainability. It's the farmer that needs to put the thing into practice on their farm to get that. So does the farmer have to pay for it? Is Nestle paying for it? Is the consumer paying for it? Is no one paying for it? Therefore, is there actually anyone that's ever going to pay for it? Therefore, is it ever going to scale? Is it going to come to life? One of the things for us as humans, not just as founders of companies, is that we really believe in our ideas, and we have to get them through. So I would recommend anyone kind of in that early stage, if you're... It's obviously relevant to have boards and all those kinds of things, but I think it's more relevant to have advisors. And I would say you want a critical friend as an advisor. You want someone that can actually support your journey, wants you to succeed, but will also ask you those tough questions. Will also go, is this actually right? Will someone pay for it? What will they pay for it? And I've been in, I'd say, I don't know, probably close to 100 meetings over the years where people have gone, it's so good people will pay any price. I've never met those people, and I know a couple of billionaires. And so you still have to show the value proposition, who it's for, and really prove that it is actually there, not just what you think, it's what the people buying it think, and how many of them are there. If it's 5 people that think you've got a great idea, awesome, sell it to them. But you probably need 500,000 people, or 5 million people, or 500 million people to really get things going. So.
Good morning. Thank you very much for all the presentations so far. They're really inspiring and exciting. I'm Eve Kawana-Brown. I work between Massey University and Venture Taranaki, so that interface between science and support for innovation in a region that needs a lot of support. We're really grateful for support we've had from Bioresource Processing Alliance and by other means. But over this, I've worked in that space for 13 years, and often what I note is that the good ideas come from people who aren't the big companies with a R&D budget. Along the way, there's been really helpful opportunities to help get proof of concept of some of their thinking, and some of them have had really good ideas, and I note also support from AgMart, Callaghan Innovation when it had getting started grants. But over time, these kind of funds, and including MPI, SFFF, etc., but as they've moved away to say, we need you to come along with funds, significant co-investment, and be big, because we want to take big and get you even bigger in exporting, we seem to have lost ability to help the smaller ideas, which is where there's often really great novel thinking. Are there thoughts of enabling that sector again a bit, that part of the ecosystem a bit more again?
Yeah, I wouldn't know the answer necessarily to that. I think BPA has a huge role to play in that and does do a lot of work in that space already. And Max talked about the $2 million that comes in from government, and there's good industry funding. I think you talk about this valley of death. There's not one valley of death. There's multiple valleys of death, as we know. Certainly, I've spent a lot of time with this government, and I don't think it would matter which government's in place. They do want to see industry step up more and back things. They do want to see foreign capital and domestic capital come in to support ideas, but the problem is that those early stage ideas are quite often radical. They're quite often things that people go, look, let me know when you've sold your first X units, right? If anyone's ever watched Shark Tank, it's one of the first questions they asked. How much are you already selling? Is it up and running? Because if you're going to back it. So I think there does need to continue to be money into that sort of early stage startup space. We've got incubators with, Sprout and a number of those across the system that have a role to play, not just in the funding aspect, but also in how do you get founders going, how do you get an accelerator. So I think there's a place to play in there. Massive Ventures obviously has a role to play, but I think, I've been part of a group that's been meeting regularly for 6 months now that is 100% focused on exactly what you're talking about. How do we get more startups? How do we get more funding into that space? Recognising that unfortunately some of them will fail, probably a number of them, but how do we actually get that going? So we've had, what we've done is we're using kind of government entities sitting around a table. We had Minister Willis with us for a dinner a couple of weeks ago. But we've got, we've had New Zealand Super, we've had Treasury, we've had a whole bunch of people trying to really build that momentum of this matters and here's what it could be in the future. It's, we could create 5,000 startups, we could create this much value, we could create this many jobs. So watch that space. We are definitely working on it.
Thank you very much.
Hi. So a follow on from that question, and it's me sitting in the industry cap with my industry hat on, is how are we as a nation and as a community better connecting the people who have capital, have investment, but don't necessarily have the ideas and also don't necessarily have contact with the people who've got the problem, right? And I think for industry sector sitting in industrial design space, there's a lot of people who are working in smaller businesses, smaller companies, who could potentially partner with other smaller businesses and other parties on projects, but they don't have that kind of ethos in how they're functioning. It's this very competitive landscape. So I'm wondering, how are we creating that opportunity in that space to connect all of those dots together?
Yeah, again, I'd love to tell you I've got the exact answer and we'll roll it out tomorrow. And I don't know that anyone in the world's really cracked that well. One of the things I will say is that I really think that we've got an advantage of how to close that gap, and that New Zealand's a village. Like, there's about 8 people that live here, right? It's, and we all know each other, and if we don't, we can get to someone within 2 phone calls. I think the challenge for us, and it's one of the many sort of quotes that I try and live by, is if you don't ask, you don't get. And so actually reaching out, connecting with people, coming to conferences like this, not just talking to the people you already know, talking to someone else, not just pitching ideas. I think that's one of the things that you get a little bit tired of everyone coming up to you and going, I've got this great idea. It's like, yeah, it's the 18th one I've heard today. And they're all great, and thanks. But it's actually, how do you listen? How do you kind of go, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if my idea and your idea could create a new idea that I didn't already have. So my challenge always to New Zealand is we are genuinely a village. Like we can get hold of just about anyone. I don't have his phone number, but I bet I could get you the Prime Minister's phone number within one text. It's pretty easy to get hold of people. Take that risk, walk up to people, connect in, ask to connect, but be mindful of not just going in for a sales job. I think that's the bit that can put people off as they're trying to connect in, because everyone's got their own ideas and everyone's got their own challenges and opportunities and issues. It's really going in and trying to listen, coming back to that first question of what would be a problem you'd want to solve, because sometimes the person you talk to, who you think would be interested in your idea, is actually completely the wrong person if you listen a bit better. So I think it is just reaching out, connecting, going to symposiums like this. Man here with a great haircut. It'll go.
Yeah, here we go. I'm a biochemical engineer who works with a lot of small companies in New Zealand and overseas. And one of the challenges for small companies is often getting a bit of access to some science and laboratory space. You know, it's not really research project stuff. It's not really highly funded stuff, but they need to do a bit of work. The BSI group in Rotorua, formerly known as Scion, has had a very open access approach to having small companies come and work in its labs. Very easy to use contracts, very open ways of having researchers come and work in the facilities here in Rotorua. And I've been a big fan of this, and I wondered if you could comment whether that sort of open approach might be rolled out through the rest of the BSI community, so that there's not a kind of closed door approach to science, but something that small companies can really take advantage of.
Yeah, look, I can, and it's a shame that the Minister's not here, because I know she would have a view on this as well. So there'll be bits of kit that are fully utilised all the time. Let's not try and advertise that they're going to be available if actually they're always fully utilised. But there is a big drive for us, not just within the CRIs, but also with the universities and across each other, to go, how do we create more access, not just for startups, but actually for anyone, to be able to get into some of this science equipment. No one can afford to buy $1 million NMR machines for their own business. So how do we make those accessible? What does that look like? So the short answer is yes, we do want to do that more. But we also want to work out how do we create that right across the whole ecosystem, not just the CRIs, but the broader ecosystem. And there will be bits of a kit that you go, I know that's in that room and I'd love to get access to it. It's like, yep, but actually what you're doing doesn't relate with everything else that's going on. So there will be no's, but the idea is to try and go, how do we create this? So we big, strong drive and strong drive from government on that as well. We get regular comments from them on how we're pulling all this together, how we're making more accessible sort of equipment, because some of it's really expensive. So, yep, definitely. Ooh, last one. What's the time? I don't know how long we've got. I've got time. Jeepers, that's dangerous. We'll do a quick karakia, quick waiata. There you go.
Okay. Good morning. My question has to do with the BSI's capability, if you like, on international collaboration or building that capability. Because within our business, the Fidelity Network, where we work with SMEs, what we have found on a very frequent basis is that there's wonderful innovation and IP coming up from within New Zealand, but the scalability doesn't exist here, it exists internationally. So, there are some wonderful opportunities that have basically died on the vine, if you like, as a result. So keen to know your thoughts on that.
Give me a bit more context as to what you'd hope BSI would bring in that, just so to help me answer.
I think where the connectivity that's missing, of course, is to access international connections or organisations that actually recognise the problem, and that your scalability in terms of solving that problem is sitting overseas. A waste stream may exist in far greater volume in the United States than it does in New Zealand, yet they haven't had the idea. We have.
Yeah, so look, I think as we're driving forward, and we're in the middle of sort of, completing merging 4 organisations into one and structure sort of stuff at the moment. But one of the big things we've been talking about is how we connect internationally. It's a double-edged sword for us, because what we won't do, I was going to say shouldn't do, but won't do, is create competition. We wouldn't take some of our great science and create a new kiwi fruit industry in China, for example, right? So those kinds of things we've got to be conscious of. But at the same time, if there's opportunities to work with international people, we should be doing that. So we want to do that more. We have people that regularly travel around to conferences. They're all, we want to keep doing that. But actually, us being able to bring that foresight and insight back and connect in is an area we want to grow. So not necessarily more travel, although I'm sure everyone in the room would love that. But actually, how do we take those learnings when you're overseas? You go to a conference and maybe you spend another day or two visiting some other things, but then you centralise that information back somehow, so that when someone who's in a completely unrelated field goes, I'm working on this, they go, oh, actually I met someone when I was in country X a couple of years ago, or earlier this year, and they might be the right person to connect to. So we are trying to step up our connections in that in that space going forward. It is definitely front of mind for our leadership team and the board. You wanted some rapid? Do you want to know where to buy it? I can.
In your your time seeing this merger, and congratulations, well done to what you've done so far. Phenomenal effort. What's been the most exciting thing that you've seen in terms of combining these very large organisations together? And is there any projects that are kind of coming out of the collaborations yet, or is it still,
Oh, look, I'll tell you, the two most exciting things I've seen, and they probably don't go to your second part of your question, sorry, Angus, but the first one is literally the first week we merged, first week of July. Not leadership, not the chief executive, the people on the ground doing the science went, I think these barriers have fallen away. And so they went and got in cars, picked up Teams calls or phones and started talking to people and saying, do you have information on this? Which they knew they did have information on, but before it was, an NDA, a confidentiality agreement, a contract, whatever else. And could you send me something? And they went, sure, here's the whole file, right? If it's a customer-specific stuff, obviously we protect that, but if it's not, which is most of what we do, they went, here's access to all of the information you might want. That wasn't, management didn't do that, right? That was the people waiting for those barriers to fall away and go, thank God, we can actually connect in. The second one, and because I think the world lives on sound bites and stories, and I think, as I said at the start, we need to do a better job of telling ours, just hearing the stories across the different sectors that I wasn't so aware of, some of those did you know type stories. I love one in this region, and I'm sure it's an older one, but if you wanted to get 1,000 trees out of a nursery for forestry, you put 2,000 in. Today you put just over 1,000 in, because we've worked out how to manage that better through a nursery. Like, that matters, that's massive. No one talks about that kind of stuff. Row planting of pine trees in New Zealand. You drive anywhere and you see them all planted in rows. I just assumed that everyone in the world did that and we just picked that up from someone. It was invented here. There's a lot of that stuff that as you get around and you start talking to people, now we don't always do a great job of monetising that for the country, but we'll get better at that, and we have got better at that. But man, there's some cool stuff that's been done across every single area, and that's probably been the coolest thing, is just getting the chance to see that, and then people getting the chance to share each other's stories. So not a specific what's the coolest project, but man, amazing stuff.
Any more questions? Speak now.
There is.
Yeah, kia ora, Mark. Thanks very much for that. Mark Henderson from Bio10X, and we're also spearheading the re-establishment of the harakeke industry within New Zealand.
Brilliant.
Through Te Honongo Hapori Harakeke, which is the Harakeke Alliance. We've had some recent collaborations with BSI, and we're looking forward to pursuing that. One of the areas in our kaupapa that's currently underway is a conversation around taonga protection and around Māori IP, or especially around the likes of harakeke, and how that suggests that when we undertake the type of work in establishing the industry, which also includes all the sciences, also may need to incorporate an understanding on how BSI in particular sort of frames the need to ensure that taonga protection is at the same level as conversations around science, innovation, market development and so on. So my question, I guess, is, in this new frame, is there a sort of a thinking or mindset within BSI that approaches that aspect?
Yeah, look, 100%. Thanks for asking the question too, and for the obvious passion in it. So you'll be able to see on our, what is still a relatively light website, but we've put out our Te Tiriti principles, which include that. You would have seen late last year the biodiscovery platform that was announced by Minister Reti. That's a key component of that, as that's being pulled together. So yeah, look, for 100% it is front of mind for us. And to be honest, not just in taonga species for New Zealand, but actually in indigenous species globally. We're aligned with that. So, yeah, very front of mind for us, 100%. There's more. Jeepers. Q&A with Mark Piper. I can hear you, but keep going. Yep.
So my question is the drive becomes like not just the war, but we're running out of gas in the country, and we're creating hydrogen and electric trucks. So what is the drive to find more or get more natural gas or renewable gas going in New Zealand? Biodiesels. You know, you're spending a lot of money on other stuff and that. You've already got all that technology running the trucks and that. And, you know, like Fonterra at Edgecombe needs gas. Oji, Kara needs gas. Where's the drivers for that? Are you going out and going, well, we need all these people and we can find all this sort of stuff and that? Or are you, which is the drive?
Yeah, look, it's such an interesting question and so front of mind. So you saw Max put up some earlier, you know, there's been some work on it, things like eco-gas. There's BioWave looking at sustainable marine biofuels. There's a lot of work going on it, but the biggest challenge, I think, is, and this probably resonates for most people in this room, is getting the funding to back it. And so, you know, it's probably nascent enough and early enough that government needs to support it. We know industry should be the ones pulling it, but which ones do they back? It's really expensive. If you're looking at biorefineries and things like that, you're talking in the billions of dollars to get sort of scale. People will only start looking at that if they've got really strong proof of concept, if they've got really strong sort of scale-up concept. So there's a lot of investment that has to happen early stage on that. And while everyone's interested in it, people need to actually take a bit of a punt and get behind a few things. So we're in early stages of discussions with people like the Defence Force, because if you talk about security, energy security kind of matters alongside that. But it's how do you get them to actually invest in something, particularly in a science frame, that could fail. You could invest $15, $20 million more in something and it could all look promising and then actually not work or actually not scale. And we find that really hard. That's the challenge, is how do we get people to actually get in behind those things? And that's why, you know, we direct a lot of the government SIF funding into those. We use contestable funding to try and get things going to a stage where we can then spin them out into, typically into startup world, see if they can get backing. So we want to create the science, but then we want to get it out of us so that it can actually get the momentum behind it to scale. But it's hard. And some of these things, particularly where you're talking about in energy, are really expensive, and getting people to back them is the challenge. So.
More questions?
Jeepers.
I have one. Just when you thought you're off the hook.
Damn it.
I think it's a fact that we're really good in this country at doing world-class science, but we're not so great at commercialising it. And I'm just interested in your reflections on what is coming from the reforms that might impact that in a positive direction, and additionally what we might need to do to get better at commercialising the R&D that we do.
Yeah, look, it's a... I'll try not to make eye contact with too many people in case I say something that offends someone in the room. I know I've been in the science sort of sector, both in Fonterra and then here for coming up 9 years, I think. And revenue, profit are quite often dirty words. We want to do the science because people should believe in it. We want to do the science because it's good for New Zealand. We want to do the science for a whole bunch of reasons, which are all true. However, none of those pay salaries. None of those pay for scale up. None of those pay for new equipment. So actually, revenue matters. Revenue matters for science. So to get revenue for science, you need to, I mean, obviously we do contract work, that's great, we need to continue to do that. But the best example that I've seen just about globally, to be honest, are things like royalty streams. So I love that, because if the product, think of gold kiwi fruit's the biggest success story out of science, a 25-year overnight success. If you think about that, that now makes Zespri close to $4 billion a year, right? Now, some of that comes back as a very tiny amount back into science for reinvestment in science, but only because Zespri makes close to $4 billion a year on the back of it. And so, that money is then reinvested, right? They're not in the room, but we don't send it back to the shareholder, to the government. They can always ask for it, but we don't. We reinvest it, and they've always backed us to do that as long as it's sensible reinvestment, and that's what they're asking us to be tighter on. So actually recognising that, both, I guess, selling our services as science, but also creating products that have value that can then create, economic value and societal value and environmental value for New Zealand. It's okay if we're part of that equation as well, because we put it back in. BSI, and so half of you in the room will know this and half of you might not, but BSI is the largest royalties earner in New Zealand of any company. I think it's now, because Wi-Fi patents have run out, the largest in Australasia. It's as a research organisation, it's one of the largest in the world. That's amazing, right? That helps fuel science, that helps fuel reinvestment back into future science. Great for BSI, way better for the industries that have supported the back of that, right? Envy Apple, $1 billion global Apple. Kiwi fruit, over $5 billion globally. Endo fights for grasses and into into feed grasses for animal agriculture. Over $3 billion impact to date. These things matter to the industries we support, and I think it's just reframing ourselves to not feel dirty if we're charging for things, but to actually appreciate the fact that we're creating wealth for others and impact beyond economic for others as well. So that'd be mine. Awesome.
Thank you, Mark. I think that we are, super fortunate to have your time today.
No problem.
And to have such a generous amount of time for questions. On the back of our great luck getting the Minister to come, Mark has to zoom off.
So did I. Yeah, so I'm going to go meet with her.
Zoom off to meet her at BSI. So let's give Mark a big round of applause.
Thanks.